Boxing is a martial art and combat sport in which two people wearing protective gloves throw punches at each other for a predetermined set of time. In a boxing ring, amateur boxing is both an Olympic and Commonwealth sport and is a common fixture in most international games. It also has its own World Championships. Boxing is supervised by a referee over a series of 1 to 3 minute intervals called rounds. The result is decided when an opponent is deemed incapable to continue by a referee, is disqualified for breaking a rule, resigns by throwing in a towel, or is pronounced the winner or loser based on the judges' scorecards at the end of the contest. In the event that both fighters gain equal scores from the judges, the fight is considered a draw. In Olympic boxing, due to the fact that a winner must be declared, in the case of a draw, the judges use technical criteria to choose the most deserving winner of the bout. While people have fought in hand-to-hand combat since before the dawn of history, the origin of boxing as an organized sport may be its acceptance by the ancient Greeks as an Olympic game in BC 688. Boxing evolved from 16th and 18th century prize fights, largely in Great Britain, to the forerunner of modern boxing in the mid-19th century, again initially in Great Britain and later in the United States. History. Ancient history. See also Ancient Greek boxing. The earliest known depiction of boxing comes from a Sumerian relief in Iraq from the 3rd millennium BCE. Later depictions from the 2nd millennium BC are found in reliefs from the Mesopotamian nations of Assyria and Babylonia, and in Hittite art from Asia Minor. The earliest evidence for fist fighting with any kind of gloves can be found on Minoan Crete, and on Sardinia, if we consider the boxing statues of Parma Mountains. Boxing was a popular spectator sport in ancient Rome. In order for the fighters to protect themselves against their opponents, they wrapped leather thongs around the fists. Eventually harder leather was used and the thongs soon became a weapon. The Romans even introduced metal studs to the thongs to make the cestus, which then led to a more sinister weapon called the myrmex. Fighting events were held at Roman amphitheaters. The Roman form of boxing was often a fight until death to please the spectators who gathered at such events. However, especially in later times, purchased slaves and trained combat performers were valuable commodities, and their lives were not given up without due consideration. Often slaves were used against one another in a circle marked on the floor. This is where the term ring came from. In AD 393, during the Roman gladiator period, boxing was abolished due to excessive brutality. It was not until the late 17th century that boxing resurfaced in London. Early London prize ring rules records of classical boxing activity disappeared after the fall of the Western Roman Empire, when the wearing of weapons became common once again and interest in fighting with the fists waned. However, there are detailed records of various fist-fighting sports that were maintained in different cities and provinces of Italy between the 12th and 17th centuries. There was also a sport in ancient Rus called kulachny boy, or fist fighting. As the wearing of swords became less common, there was renewed interest in fencing with the fists. The sport would later resurface in England during the early 16th century in the form of bare-knuckle boxing, sometimes referred to as prize fighting. The first documented account of a bare-knuckle fight in England appeared in 1681 in the London Protestant Mercury, and the first English bare-knuckle champion was James Figg in 1719. This is also the time when the word boxing first came to be used. It should be noted that this earliest form of modern boxing was very different. contests in Mr. Fig's time, in addition to fist fighting, also contained fencing and cudgeling. On 6 January 1681, the first recorded boxing match took place in Britain when Christopher Monk, 2nd Duke of Albemarle, engineered a bout between his butler and his butcher, with the latter winning the prize. Early fighting had no written rules. There were no weight divisions around limits, and no referee. In general, it was extremely chaotic. An early article on boxing was published in Nottingham, 1713, by Sir Thomas Parkins, who was a successful wrestler from Bunney, Nottinghamshire, who had practiced the techniques he described. The article, a single page in his Manual of Wrestling and Fencing, Pro Gymnase Mater, the in-player or Cornish hug wrestler, described a system of head-butting, punching, eye-gouging, chokes, and hard throws, not recognized in boxing today. The first boxing rules, called the Broughton's Rules, were introduced by champion Jack Broughton in 1743 to protect fighters in the ring where death sometimes occurred. Under these rules, if a man went down and could not continue after a count of 30 seconds, the fight was over. Hitting a downed fighter and grasping below the waist were prohibited. Broughton encouraged the use of mufflers, a form of padded bandage or mitten, to be used in jousting or sparring sessions in training, and in exhibition matches. These rules did allow the fighters an advantage not enjoyed by today's boxers. They permitted the fighter to drop to one knee to end the round, and begin the 30-second count at any time. Thus a fighter realizing he was in trouble had an opportunity to recover. However, this was considered unmanly, and was frequently disallowed by additional rules negotiated by the seconds of the boxers. In modern boxing, there is a 3-minute limit to rounds. Intentionally going down in modern boxing will cause the recovering fighter to lose points in the scoring system. Furthermore, as the contestants did not have heavy leather gloves and wrist straps to protect the hands, they used different punching technique to preserve the hands, because the head was a common target to hit full out. Almost all period manuals have powerful straight punches with the whole body behind them to the face as the basic blows. Marquess of Queensberry Rules. In 1867, the Marquess of Queensberry Rules were drafted by John Chambers for amateur championships held at Lilliebridge in London for lightweights, middleweights and heavyweights. The rules were published under the patronage of the Marquess of Queensberry, whose name has always been associated with them. There were 12 rules in all, and they specified that fights should be a fair stand-up boxing match in a 24-foot square or similar ring. Rounds were 3 minutes with 1-minute rest intervals between rounds. Each fighter was given a 10-second count if he was knocked down, and wrestling was banned. The introduction of gloves of fair size also changed the nature of the bouts. An average pair of boxing gloves resembles a bloated pair of mittens and are laced up around the wrists. The gloves can be used to block an opponent's blows. As a result of their introduction, bouts became longer and more strategic, with greater importance attached to defensive maneuvers such as slipping, bobbing, countering and angling, because less defensive emphasis was placed on the use of the forearms and more on the gloves. The classical forearms outwards, torso-leaning back stance of the bare-knuckle boxer was modified to a more modern stance in which the torso is tilted forward and the hands are held closer to the face. Late 19th and early 20th centuries. Through the late 19th century, the martial art of boxing or prize fighting was primarily a sport of dubious legitimacy. Outlawed in England and much of the United States, prize fights were often held at gambling venues and broken up by police. Brawling and wrestling tactics continued, and riots at prize fights were common occurrences. Still, throughout this period, there arose some notable bare-knuckle champions who developed fairly sophisticated fighting tactics. The English case of R.V. Coney in 1882 found that a bare-knuckle fight was an assault occasioning actual bodily harm, despite the consent of the participants. This marked the end of widespread public bare-knuckle contests in England. The first world heavyweight champion under the Queensberry rules was Gentleman Jim Corbett, who defeated John L. Sullivan in 1892 at the Pelican Athletic Club in New Orleans. The first instance of film censorship in the United States occurred in 1897 when several states banned the showing of prize fighting films from the state of Nevada, where it was legal at the time. Throughout the early 20th century, boxers struggled to achieve legitimacy. They were aided by the influence of promoters like Tex Rickard and the popularity of great champions such as John L. Sullivan. Rules. The Marquess of Queensberry rules have been the general rules governing modern boxing since the publication in 1867. A boxing match typically consists of a determined number of 3-minute rounds, a total of up to 9 to 12 rounds. A minute is typically spent between each round, with the fighters in their assigned corners receiving advice and attention from the coach and staff. The fight is controlled by a referee who works within the ring to judge and control the conduct of the fighters, rule on their ability to fight safely, count knockdown fighters, and rule on fouls. Up to 3 judges are typically present at ringside to score the bout and assign points to the boxers based on punches that connect, defense, knockdowns, and other, more subjective measures. Because of the open-ended style of boxing judging, many fights have controversial results, in which one or both fighters believe they have been robbed or unfairly denied a victory. Each fighter has an assigned corner of the ring, where his or her coach, as well as one or more seconds, may administer to the fighter at the beginning of the fight and between rounds. Each boxer enters into the ring from their assigned corners at the beginning of each round and must cease fighting and return to the corner at the signaled end of each round. A bout in which the predetermined number of rounds passes is decided by the judges, and is said to go the distance. The fighter with the higher score at the end of the fight is ruled the winner. With 3 judges, unanimous and split decisions are possible, as are draws. A boxer may win the bout before a decision is reached through a knockout. Such bouts are said to have ended inside the distance. If a fighter is knocked down during the fight, determined by whether the boxer touches the canvas floor of the ring with any part of the body other than the feet as a result of the opponent's punch and not a slip, as determined by the referee. The referee begins counting until the fighter returns to his or her feet and can continue. Should the referee count to 10, then the knocked down boxer is ruled knocked out, and the other boxer is ruled the winner by knockout. A technical knockout is possible as well, and is ruled by the referee, fight doctor, or a fighter's corner if a fighter is unable to safely continue to fight, based upon injuries of being judged unable to effectively defend themselves. Many jurisdictions and sanctioning agencies also have a 3 knockdown rule, in which 3 knockdowns in a given round result in a TKO. A TKO is considered knockout in a fighter's record. A standing 8-count rule may also be in effect. This gives the referee the right to step in and administer a count of 8 to a fighter that he feels may be in danger, even if no knockdown has taken place. After counting, the referee will observe the fighter and decide if he is fit to continue. For scoring purposes, a standing 8-count is treated as a knockdown. In general, boxers are prohibited from hitting below the belt, holding, tripping, pushing, biting, or spitting. The boxer's shorts are raised so the opponent is not allowed to hit to the groin area with intent to cause pain or injury. Failure to abide by the former may result in a foul. They also are prohibited from kicking, headbutting, or hitting with any part of the arm other than the knuckles of a closed fist. They are prohibited as well from hitting the back of the neck or head of the kidneys. They are prohibited from holding the ropes for support when punching, holding an opponent while punching, or ducking below the belt of their opponent. If a clinch, a defensive move in which a boxer wraps his or her opponent's arms and holds on to create a pause, is broken by the referee, each fighter must take a full step back before punching again. When a boxer is knocked down, the other boxer must immediately cease fighting and move to the furthest neutral corner of the ring until the referee has either ruled a knockout or called for the fight to continue. Violations of these rules may be ruled fouls by the referee, who may issue warnings, deduct points, or disqualify an offending boxer, causing an automatic loss depending on the seriousness and intentionality of the foul. An intentional foul that causes injury that prevents a fight from continuing usually causes the boxer who committed it to be disqualified. A fighter who suffers an accidental low blow may be given up to 5 minutes to recover, after which they may be ruled knocked out if they are unable to continue. Accidental fouls that cause injury-ending a bout may lead to a no contest result, or else cause the fight to go to a decision if enough rounds have passed. Unheard of these days, but common during the early 20th century in North America. A newspaper decision might be made after a no-decision bout had ended. A no-decision bout occurred when, by law or by pre-arrangement of the fighters, if both boxers were still standing at the fight's conclusion and there was no knockout. No official decision was rendered and neither boxer was declared the winner, but this did not prevent the pool of ringside newspaper reporters from declaring a consensus result among themselves and printing a newspaper decision in the publications. Officially, however, a no-decision bout resulted in neither boxer winning or losing. Boxing historians sometimes use these unofficial newspaper decisions in compiling fight records for illustrative purposes only. Often, media outlets covering a match will personally score the match and post the scores as an independent sentence in the report. Professional versus amateur boxing. Throughout the 17th to 19th centuries, boxing bouts were motivated by money. As the fighters competed for prize money, promoters controlled the gate, and spectators bet on the result. The modern Olympic movement revived interest in amateur sports, and amateur boxing became an Olympic sport in 1908. In their current form, Olympic and other amateur bouts are typically limited to 3 or 4 rounds. Scoring is computed by points based on the number of clean blows landed, regardless of impact, and fighters wear protective headgear, reducing the number of injuries, knockdowns, and knockouts. Currently, scoring blows in amateur boxing is subjectively counted by ringside judges, but the Australian Institute for Sport has demonstrated a prototype of an automated boxing scoring system which introduces scoring objectivity, improves safety, and arguably makes the sport more interesting to spectators. Professional boxing remains by far the most popular form of the sport globally, though amateur boxing is dominant in Cuba and some former Soviet republics. For most fighters, an amateur career, especially at the Olympics, serves to develop skills and gain experience in preparation for a professional career. Amateur boxing may be found at the collegiate level, at the Olympic Games and Commonwealth Games, and in many other venues sanctioned by amateur boxing associations. Amateur boxing has a point-scoring system that measures the number of clean blows landed rather than physical damage. Bouts consist of 3 rounds of 3 minutes in the Olympic and Commonwealth Games, and 3 rounds of 3 minutes in a national ABA bout, each with a 1-minute interval between rounds. Competitors wear protective headgear and gloves with a white strip a circle across the knuckle. There are cases, however, where white-ended gloves are not required but any solid color may be worn. The white end just is a way to make it easier for judges to score clean hits. Each competitor must have the hands properly wrapped pre-fight for added protection on the hands and for added cushion under the gloves. Gloves worn by the fighters must be 12 ounces in weight unless the fighters weigh under 165 pounds, thus allowing them to wear 10-ounce gloves. A punch is considered a scoring punch only when the boxes connect with the white portion of the gloves. Each punch that lands cleanly on the head or torso with sufficient force is awarded a point. A referee monitors the fight to ensure that competitors use only legal blows. A belt worn over the torso represents the lower limit of punches. Any boxer repeatedly landing low blows below the belt is disqualified. Referees also ensure that the boxers don't use holding tactics to prevent the opponent from swinging. If this occurs, the referee separates the opponents and orders them to continue boxing. Repeated holding can result in a boxer being penalized or ultimately disqualified. Referees will stop the bout if a boxer is seriously injured, if one boxer is significantly dominating the other, or if the score is severely imbalanced. Amateur bouts which end this way may be noted as RSC, with notations for an outclassed opponent, outscored opponent, injury or head injury. Professional boxing professional bouts are usually much longer than amateur bouts, typically ranging from 10 to 12 rounds, though 4-round fights are common for less experienced fighters or club fighters. There are also some 2- and 3-round professional bouts, especially in Australia. Through the early 20th century, it was common for fights to have unlimited rounds, ending only when one fighter quit, benefiting high-energy fighters like Jack Dempsey. 15 rounds remained the internationally recognized limit for championship fights for most of the 20th century until the early 1980s, when the death of boxer Duck Hook Im eventually prompted the World Boxing Council and other organizations sanctioning professional boxing to reduce the limit to 12 rounds. Headgear is not permitted in professional bouts, and boxers are generally allowed to take much more damage before a fight is halted. At any time, the referee may stop the contest if he believes that one participant cannot defend himself due to injury. In that case, the other participant is awarded a technical knockout win. A technical knockout would also be awarded if a fighter lands a punch that opens a cut on the opponent, and the opponent is later deemed not fit to continue by a doctor because of the cut. For this reason, fighters often employ cutmen, whose job is to treat cuts between rounds so that the boxer is able to continue despite the cut. If a boxer simply quits fighting, or if his corner stops the fight, then the winning boxer is also awarded a technical knockout victory. In contrast with amateur boxing, professional male boxers have to be bare-chested.